Hello everyone. In today's video we're going to be taking a look at flying the P-51 in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Let's go ahead and get started. So first things first, this is a neat plane. For those of you who have not played around with the P-51 in Flight Simulator 10, it is a bit of a treat to fly this plane. It's definitely on the fast side, but it's actually surprisingly stable and easy to fly compared to a lot of its contemporaries of the time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and walk you through the basics here. It's not the most complicated plane to start, which I think is wonderfully helpful here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to double check to make sure our magneto switch is in the off position, which it looks like it is. We're going to flip on our battery switch, which is this lovely thing here, battery. We're going to flip on the alternator as well. I like to pop on the position lights, just kind of give everybody a heads up that we're getting started. We're going to come over to the throttle. We're going to crack it about 1 inch, which is not too far. We're going to take our prop RPM and we're going to slap it up to max RPM. We're going to take our carburetor heat handle, which is this big one right here. We're just going to, I guess I don't have to worry about that very much. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and come down here and make sure the fuel shutoff valve is on. This is confusing. On is up. Yeah. We're going to go ahead and make sure this is on main tank left hand. We should probably check to make sure there's some fuel in there. Gotta love these silly fuel gauges. We're just going to put it in the floor where nobody can see it. I mean, it beats this fuel gauge, which is behind your head that you can barely even see at all. But, oh yeah, doesn't work too bad. We're going to go ahead and pop the fuel boost switch, which is going to be this one. Whoa, don't open that one yet. That one right there, we should see fuel pressure increase pretty much immediately. And we're just going to confirm that that works pretty much right away, which, fortunately for us, looks like it does. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to hold on the primer for 3 to 4 seconds. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. Close enough. So now starting this thing is a bit of a trick. So what you're going to do here is you're going to click on the starter, crank it. You're going to slap the magnetos on, and you're going to click the mixture to run all at the same time. So I'm actually going to put this to idle cutoff. So it's all some quick fingers here. So we're going to go ahead and crank this all the way up. Then we're going to go ahead and click that on. And we get this big poof of white smoke. And as you can see, the engine starts perfectly. Yeah, you know, engine purring. No, it's just funny. It's just funny. So this engine's nice and started up. It's going to take a few moments to go ahead and warm up. Of course, if this were the one that you probably have seen in World War II, there'd be a lot of other things we have to do here, but I'm not going to worry about it too much. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to come down here. I'm going to flip us over to the fuselage tanks to keep this plane somewhat in balance. I'm also going to come down here and bop the radio switch here so that we have the ability to turn on our transponder and let other folks around us kind of know where we are. I love the fact that we, can't use that. There's so many fun switches on this thing. Oh, what about good. One thing I would double check too while we're over here is make sure that your radiator air coolant is set to automatic, which it is. I also like to make sure this one is. And if you needed to override it, you could actually pop the switch out of the way and you could crank it one way or the other, just like you can in the real one. I've never needed to do this in Flight Sim. Maybe you need to someday. I do not. One thing I would like to do while I'm on this side is get ready for takeoff. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the rudder trim and we're going to crank it to be 5 degrees to the right. Now, some of you are probably saying it needs that much rudder trim. Oh yeah, wait until you try to get this thing airborne. We're then going to make sure our elevator trim is going to be set to 6 degrees. So I'm going to go ahead and go press and crank on that thing. And once we get to 6 degrees, you can see that our trim is, I could probably do a little tiny bit more. Looks good. We're now good for rudder. We're now good for elevator. If you skip this step, you're going to find takeoff to be slightly exciting, to say the least. All right, let's go ahead now. Taxi your way over to the runway. We're sitting here in lovely. This is right outside of Honolulu. We're going to do a couple maneuvers and then come back for a landing here. So just taking a quick peek, you can see we've got a nice spot here. We've got a little teeny tiny runway off of our side there. We'll go ahead and take advantage of that. See you in a moment. All right, taxiing this thing is relatively straightforward. What you're going to want to do is you're going to just gently get it rolling. And one of the problems you're going to run into is being able to see. I always have a button in my cockpit that allows me to kind of stick my head around. One thing you could do in the old days is you could go do these big S-turns. One thing you want to watch out for is any application of power on this thing is going to result in the thing zoom and it's going to zip away on you. One thing I do recommend is if you take the elevators and you go ahead and pull the stick back towards you when you're taxiing here, it's going to make it a little bit safer for us. We're going to go do the bouncy bounce thing over onto this, not the world's nicest runway, but hey, it works for us fine. You'll find that the rudder pedals work a lot better than they do in the real world. Otherwise, you'd need a lot of differential braking on this thing to make your life a little bit more exciting. I'm going to go ahead and hold the elevator all the way back. Go ahead and tap the brakes as we kind of come line ourselves up here. Oh man, I wish I had differential brakes, but I do not. All right, we're going to need some ground handling here. Ground handling. Thank you, ground handling. You were very helpful. You want to just press the Y key if that occurs to you. So this one's pretty straightforward. We want to make sure we are at maximum everything. Everything's ready to go. That looks good. That looks good. That looks good. All right, we're going to do flaps 20. So I'm going to go ahead and pop this sucker a couple clicks. And you can watch those big old honking flaps slowly make their way down. Again, I'm just going to come stick my head down here, make sure everything's looking pretty good. 20, yep, they even tell you what the flaps for takeoff is. All right, so takeoff in this thing is terrifying, but I like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold the elevator slightly back, and we're going to smoothly apply power here. Again, notice I barely touched it, and I'm already going that much faster. So since we set our rudder trim correctly, this plane should not be brutal here. So again, I'm smoothly applying power here, and come right up to 60 inches. We're just going to gently hold the elevator back. The plane's going to start getting a little loose on us. We want to get gentle here. Don't try to rip it off the ground or you'll depart before you get in the air. So what's going to happen is the plane is going to suddenly get really light on you, and then you're going to suddenly find yourself in the air. I'm going to go ahead and get my landing gear out of the way immediately as I slowly start to climb up here. Bring the nose down just a teeny tiny bit, and then we get ourselves, bring up those flaps. I'm going to get myself a little bit more airspeed here. This is 150. Go ahead and get rid of both of those notches of flaps. Appreciate the look here. And we're just going to go ahead and gently come to a right. And now it's simply a matter of reducing ourselves to get ourselves to a little bit safer power here. So I'm going to go ahead and back down the left side. Then my manifold pressure down at 55. Then I'm going to slowly bring down my propeller RPM to about 2,700. Now, according to the book, we're supposed to be able to get 2,600, but it depends on which model. So I'm going to go to 54 inches, which is right there, and we're going to get 2,600 RPM, and that is an amazingly high-performance cruise here. So I'm going to go ahead and give myself tons of trim to go ahead and bring myself back down here. I notice the plane is pulling to the right a little bit, which makes sense. The reason it's doing that to us is on account of the fact, that, again, we set that massive amount of rudder trim. This is a good time to go ahead and reset it. How do you reset the rudder trim? Well, pretty easy. You look at this little knob right here. All you have to do is crank the rudder trim to the left until you notice that that little thing in the bottom corner, that little ball right there that you're seeing is slowly making its way to the center. You're going to make sure that little ball is all the way back to normal, and that's going to tell you that your rudder trim is set correctly. Just checking it out here. You can see it's taken a lifetime, so I'm just going to come over here and play with it by hand. Again, the faster you go, the less trim you're going to need. I do recommend readjusting your trim, because otherwise this aircraft becomes a little bit of a bear to kind of keep in a straight line. Looks like I could use just a tiny bit more left. Perfect. So now our aircraft is trimmed out. We're at absolutely maximum performance right now. As long as you keep everything in the green, I shouldn't have too much difficulty. One thing I do like to kind of keep an eye out is going to be my overall engine performance here. I can see the oil is fine. I can see that I've got a good fuel temperature. The regular engine temperature is fine. I don't have to worry about it too much. And now it's just a matter of enjoying the plane. Now this plane is definitely was designed with its laminar flow wing to be a kind of a high altitude interceptor kind of escort sort of a plane. It is not what I would consider like an insanely fast turning plane. It's not to say you can't turn quick with it. It's just to say that it was designed for altitudes that are way up there, not necessarily altitudes that are way down here. Unfortunately, I don't think we have the little wire that we can bring. Yeah, we don't have the little war emergency power wire, which I guess makes sense. All right, I'm going to go ahead and appreciate these little mountains here. So turning this thing is pretty straightforward. We have a pretty big aileron, so when you do bank this thing, if you look down below, this airplane instantly comes out of coordination. So what you want to do is you want to go ahead and push the rudder right as you tip. Bring it to neutral. When you tip again the other way, you're just going to go ahead and do the same exact thing. So left foot, left tip, right foot, right tip. That's simply an easy way to do it. It's exactly the same as any other plane. This one's just a little bit more sensitive as far as the bumps go on this one. Of course, if you kick the rudder too hard, you can find your whole self kind of departing. Speaking of departing, one of the fun things to try in this plane is causing you to stall. When you do stall, it tends to drop a wing. Remember, pair. You want to make sure you pull the power out, aileron's neutral, rudder forward, and you want to make sure that elevator goes boop like that and launches you out the ceiling there. So you can see I'm leveling this plane off right now. Again, I'm doing the best I can with the instrumentation that I have at my disposal here. And you're noticing we're hovering about 300 miles an hour. That is not knots, but it is certainly fast enough. Give this thing a little bit of trim. We have no automatic pilot anywhere to be seen. Another thing worth noting is notice since we get to a higher altitude that we have significantly reduced manifold pressure here. If you want to get that back up, you have to actually push that throttle a little bit forward so that you can reacquire that. Next thing I always like to show off, which I find kind of interesting in this plane, is how much fuel we've used so far. Ta-da! We've already used 9 gallons of fuel, which is quite a bit. Again, this is a very, very high-performance airplane, so it doesn't surprise me in the slightest. Next thing we want to take a look at is the navigational systems. So you're looking around, Do we have navigation? Do we have navigation? What navigation? We have a navigational radar, even though we have an RMI, which is unfortunate because we have no way of selecting what ADF beacon that we're interested in is. But lucky for us, we do have a VOR, so we can actually try this out. So I'm going to come down here. We'll go ahead and dial in 114.8, which is a nearby VOR station. I'm going to press the swap button, and we're going to go ahead and flip the plane here and see if any needles start to move. Start pulling back, and if you take a close look, you're going to notice that as I turn the plane, we have this handy-dandy little needle that seems to be pointing over here to the left. So we'll go ahead and pull the plane to the left here, and you're immediately going to notice that that needle doesn't do much for us other than indicate the current direction we're facing. Go ahead and level the plane off right here, and you notice we're heading at about, let's call 315 degrees. Coming down here, you'll notice that that needle is kind of pointing off to here to a 240 based on this being directly towards north. So unfortunately for us, our handy-dandy VOR tech, unless we had some other way of navigating, we're kind of sunk. So I'm going to go ahead and turn some more here, let that needle kind of spin around. There we go. And now that station is going to be directly behind us. I come a little bit to the left. It's kind of like a poor man's ADF sort of a thing here. So if I were to go ahead and flip the plane around, we'd expect this needle to take a 180 degree. So go ahead and flip us around. Go ahead and pull the throttle back whenever you're ever operating upside down. You don't want to accidentally. And we're going to go ahead and pull up. And now that VOR station is going to be located roughly off our nose once everything kind of restabilizes here. I got to come to the right a little bit more. I'm sorry, I need to come to the left a little bit more. Like I said, this one is definitely a tricky one to operate. And that should be right off of our 12 o'clock now, which is actually located right there on the coast. So you can see that even though we don't have a fancy meter, we can still roughly navigate instrument with this. Of course, you've got your other instruments to navigate as well. Speaking of navigation, let's navigate over to the runway and see if we can put this thing on the ground. Now, landing this airplane is an interesting experience for the uninitiated. If you don't have tail dragger experience, it tends to surprise people quite a bit because what would happen is you're going to come in on tail dragger, and then you're not going to realize that you're an extra 6 feet off the ground to every tail dragger you've probably ever flown before. When you do things like this, of course, you tend to get a bit of a surprise bump at the end, so to speak. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cheat a tiny bit here. I'm going to open up the GTN 750. It's been a little weird lately, so it wouldn't surprise me if it gives me some shenanigans and goings-ons here. I'm noticing my coolant temperature is getting a little warm. I'm going to go ahead and back my throttle up to 45. Click on the map button, and zoom out a little tiny bit. Look at those lovely mountains there, and we got the little naval station on the side, and we're going to line ourselves right up at the international airport, which is going to be right down here on this side of things. Man, you've got to love how fast this airplane is. Come out ripping here. It's a wonderful VOR airplane, too, if you can deal with the fact you can't see out the front of it. And you can see we've got all of our heavy-duty runways right here. All right, landing this aircraft. Oh, boy, you're in for a treat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to immediately start slowing this plane down because I will probably have to go around if I don't get this thing reduced in speed. Next, what we want to do is we want to make sure we have about 2,700 RPMs. So I'm going to go ahead and push the propeller control until we get to 2,700 RPM. Looks pretty good. And we're just going to go ahead and slow down. I'm going to go ahead and do myself some quick little S-turns so we can get this thing nice and slow. Now, the cool thing with this airplane is just like a Piper, basically you're going to select one RPM, one manifold pressure, and you essentially leave it there the entire approach. Assuming you're at a correct 3 degrees, the aircraft essentially lands itself. You don't have to be panicking too much about things like specific speeds or anything like that. So I'm going to go ahead and slow myself down here. I'll actually fly a little bit of a slip. Again, just to do everything I can to slow this plane down. Oh, boy. I'm just going to do a quick donut here because we need to get rid of a lot more energy. Like I said, this is a fast plane. All right, pull it back just a little bit. We're going to get into the white arc here. The plane's not liking this very much, which makes sense. We're starting to run out of energy here. Remember what I was saying about that stall and that spin earlier? Be kind of a hard way to find out. All right, we got ourselves down to about 175 miles an hour. Imagine if your 172 could do this speed. I guess it wouldn't be a 172, would you? All right, spin us around one more revolution, and we are now all set. Pull that throttle back. I'm going to go ahead and I'll pull the nose up just a little bit. Landing gear come down. They take a lifetime to come down, and we're going to go ahead and dump those flaps all the way to position 40. Take a look. Looks good. Lift that nose up just a little bit. So now the manual says we're supposed to use 22 to 23 inches of mercury, and that should give us just the right speed. So I'm going to go ahead and dial in 22.3 inches there, 22.5. Give myself a whole bucket of trim here. Wow, that is probably more trim than I think I've ever applied to anything here. So now this aircraft is basically going to land itself. Now, what they didn't tell you, though, is that 22 assumes that you're a lot lighter than we are, which we are not. I'm noticing that nose is starting to get really high on the horizon, so I'm just going to start feeding in a little bit of throttle with a little bit of right foot. Remember, this is a big engine on this thing. So their little trick of 22, I don't think applies here. I'm actually back up to 50, and we're still sinking. So that just gets you an idea of how wonderful that can be some days. I'll line us up off the nose here. We're getting about 140 miles an hour. That's pretty fair, pretty fair. Like I said, we're basically combat weight right now. I'm way past combat weight. Line us up at the end of the runway. Good time to do your Gunfels checks. Let's just make sure we have our landing gear down and all that other stuff. Otherwise, we can embarrass ourselves a little bit more here. There we go. Nice. You gotta love the flaps on this thing. There's our lovely runway. We'll go ahead and reduce back to their 22, 23. All right, we're going to come right over the runway here. Give it just a little bit of throttle. You're going to fly the plane down to the ground. Don't just cut the throttle and try to stink it on. It doesn't work. All right, we're a couple inches off the ground here. I'm going to start backing the throttle up. It's going to start getting slow all of a sudden. There it goes, right there. That's what you want. And we're just going to let the thing sink down. Hold that nose up a little bit if you bounce. It's okay. Whoa! I always forget that the brakes modeled in Microsoft Flight Simulator are vastly stronger than the real ones are. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the stick back towards me. I'm going to go ahead and gently hit the brakes this time. Like I said, apparently we have these new carbon fiber brake pads or something like that. That was ridiculous. And we're just going to go ahead and smoothly bring the plane up to a stop. Just like that. And again, wow, what is the deal with those brakes? Okay, we are here. Hopefully this video is helpful. This is a pretty neat plane if you haven't gotten a shot at it. I really like the T6, but this is a great cruising plane. I wish its navigational systems were a little bit easier to use, but other than that, enjoy.